Do you want to become a CFO and take control of your career? Our podcast series From Go to CFO will give you a unique insight into what it takes to become a successful CFO. Hosted by the three amigos at AXR Recruitment and Search, myself, Greg O'Shea, and my colleagues Kunal Gupta and Nick Constein, we speak to inspiring and successful CFOs from our network as they share their career journeys with us. It's the closest thing you're going to get to delving into the mind of a CFO. We hope you enjoy it.
Welcome to today's episode from Grow to CFO. My name is Nick Constein, Associate Director here at AXR Recruitment and Search. Today, we're joined by Jean-Baptiste Naudet, CFO at Australian Red Cross. Over a 30-year career, JB has worked at some blue-chip businesses including Thales, Flight Centre, Coca-Cola and Johnson Johnson, where he's held finance and commercial leadership roles across APAC before ultimately stepping into a CFO role in the division in the consumer business. In the last several years, his focus has been purpose-led transformation in the non-for-profit sector, first at St Vincent de Paul and now at Red Cross, leading turnarounds, modernizing reporting and planning, and reframing outcomes through a return on impact lens. He also currently serves on the board at Karatani. In this episode, we'll explore how to lead finance through change, translating profit to surplus and ROI to return on impact, navigating career pivots between corporate and for-purpose, and the practical tools for building trust, collaboration, and sustainable impact. Thank you for joining us, JB. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm very good. Thanks for having me, Nick.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Usually we try to get someone to get a little bit of an introduction. If you could just tell us a little bit about where did you grow up, a little bit about your life before your professional career.
Yeah, so my name being Jean-Baptiste, but obviously JB is a lot easier. I come from France. I was born and raised in Paris. I did my education there. I was an only child. And then, now I've got, I'm married to an Australian beautiful wife. I've been here for 26 years. I've got two children, 16 and 13.
Yeah, wow.
So yeah, loving life in Australia.
Yeah, it's funny how you can just blink and all the years pass. I was reflecting on my 11 years in Australia and married to an Australian as well. And time just flies. It's absolutely insane. Cool.
Absolutely.
And so from a professional standpoint, can you just give everyone a bit of a high-level career of your experience?
Yeah. So like you said, straight after my uni in France, I joined Thales, which is a large defense French multinational. And after a short stint in head office, they sent me to the UK to work with the CFO across the whole UK. And then after that period, I actually, asked, there was a job in Paris, there was a job in London. And then the person that I worked for in head office said, "Hey, I found you a job in Australia. Would you be interested?"
Wow.
And, I did a bit of work experience in California, obviously the UK, a bit in Tunisia. And I thought, why not? It's the other side of the world. I was 23. So I came to Australia and I continued working with Thales. They acquired the Australian defense industry. So that was interesting. I had to put in new systems basically to capture all the different sites that we had in Australia and then report back to the head office in France. Got my first manager's role at 26. I was proud of myself. I was the head of the shared services there. So yeah, but after 7 years at Thales, I thought, okay, if I don't move, then I'm going to be pigeonholed in defense. Or maybe that's what you think when you're young,
Yeah.
So I moved and I went to Flight Centre for a couple of years. Very different, obviously. Wonderful organization, really focused on people leadership and people in general. So I did that for a couple of years. Then I joined Coca-Cola Amatil, which is now Euro-Pacific Partners, for 4 years. Mainly in finance, but I also worked in strategy there, in competitor strategy, which was very interesting. But then I thought, okay, I probably should go back to finance in terms of career. And I was a young father at the time. So then I joined Johnson & Johnson and I stayed there for 10 years. So first I was the financial controller for their medical device company. So a bit of a different role to what I did. Everything else was more kind of FP&A and commercial business partnering. This one was obviously that core finance, SOX, standards, etc. Did that for 4 years. Then I moved out of finance and sideways. I went to the pharmaceutical division called Janssen. And then I looked after business intelligence and insights for Australia and New Zealand. Then I got promoted to a commercial director role at APAC, looking after still business intelligence, but also mergers and acquisition, as well as some strategic marketing for some older drugs. And that was amazing. A lot of learnings, etc. But then again, my CFO that hired me said, "Hey, are you still connected with the finance world for succession planning?" So I said, "Well, not really. I've been having fun doing all these things here." But he said, well, you should. So I contacted each of the managing directors of the 3 divisions and whatever they call VPs of the region. And then a role came up in the consumer space. So I came back into finance and back, I guess, working for Australia, looking after their consumer division. And then that takes us to COVID and I left Johnson & Johnson. And after that, I thought, well, I really enjoyed that sense of purpose of working for Johnson & Johnson. I think their motto when I joined was caring for the world, one patient at a time. And as a young father, it really hit home, I was proud of myself working there and proud of what the company was achieving. So a couple of non-for-profit came, and I never thought I would work for a non-for-profit, having worked for those big multinationals. But I thought that would be for purpose on steroids. So I joined St Vincent de Paul, New South Wales, wonderful organization, quite a large CFO roles abroad with, IT and property procurement, things like that, fleet, payroll. And that was great. Worked there for 3 years, had to do a big turnaround, install a few systems, and we can talk about that. And then after 3 years, I thought, okay, I'm ready for my next challenge. And then I almost went back into healthcare. I was last 2 in a couple of roles for hospital, for a medical device company, pharma, etc. But another non-for-profit was on the radar with, a bit of a bigger kind of ambition. It felt more global as well. So I joined the Australian Red Cross 2 years ago. Wow. Again, another turnaround to be done and a few other things. But yeah, so that's where I am now and really enjoying it.
Yeah. That's such a fascinating career journey. And we get asked all the time of people who've worked in, large either ASX or multinationals, and they say they want to get into that for purpose space. So I'll pause it there because we'll ask you that a little bit later. But if you want to kick off, I'd just love to start at your experience at Thales. So working across the multiple markets as you did. When you made the move, what was that like for you moving to Australia? Because you'd never been here prior? Or
No.
Yeah, wow, okay. So what was that like professionally and personally, kind of adjusting to a completely different lifestyle?
Yeah. Australia, I didn't know whether Sydney was East Coast, West Coast, North Coast. I knew the capital was not Sydney and Melbourne from my schooling, that it was, something a bit different. In Canberra, there were surfers and koalas and that's about it. But I thought, again, I was young. I was 23. I was single. And like I said, I worked a little bit in the US. I worked in Europe and a bit of North Africa. So I thought, this is the other side of the world. I'll go there for 2 years and, have a good time and discover the area. So that was personally. But yeah, coming in, like I said, I did it already, moving to England on my own, very young, straight after university. So I was used, I guess, to come somewhere new and I guess make new friends and, learn the areas, etc. So, but that was all fine and great. And professionally, continued with the Thales way. So that was nice, being transferred across. Obviously, the person who referred me for that role knew I could do the role. It was a cost controller role, my first role. So quite a lot of detail, big programs and all these work breakdown structures and etc. But then when they acquired the Australian defense industry, and that's what the person that brought me over knew they were working on, then I was asked to basically look after that management accounting for the new entity, which was government before. So there was not a lot of, in rigor in a way in that reporting and consolidation of numbers, which obviously had to be done on a monthly basis back to the head office in France. So that was really interesting. But I met a lot of good friends, which are very strong friends. My boss at the time is still a very good friend, a person called Alan Ball, still a good friend of mine. So it was great. And obviously I loved it and I decided to stay
must
in
have,
Australia.
You've been here for quite a long time, so you must have enjoyed your time. I find that once you've moved and lived in a different country, there's kind of this familiarity of what you need to do when you move again. And I think that probably helped you
absolutely
in your journey. And so you became a manager quite young. And what was that like? What did you learn about leadership at that stage?
Yeah, at the time, I thought I was doing a good job, so I had the shared service department and the management accounting team still under me. And now, I thought, okay, I'll have an open door. I'll be approachable as a person. I'll listen to people and try and help them out. So at the time, I thought I was doing a job. But it's only later, having worked, for example, at Flight Centre, which was really focused on people and people leadership. They didn't have systems at Flight Centres. I don't think they still have. I don't think they hardly had a people and culture team, but they had people. They didn't use PowerPoint, but there was people talking off the cuff with passion, etc. So I read a lot of, books around emotional intelligence, servant leadership, all these different things. So then I realized, okay, there's more to leadership than what I thought I was doing.
Yeah.
And you've got to really work hard to help the people that you work with. The same when I worked at Johnson & Johnson, continue a lot of amazing, courses they send you on, all these different things. For example, learning leadership. I think it's called leadership pipelines, where at different levels of leadership, you should be acting differently. When you start managing managers, you need to change again as a leader. You can't be the same as an individual contributor or just as a manager of a team. And I really got into me this thing that people work for an organization, okay? And obviously they get paid. So that's kind of what they do and you get back. But what you should give back to that person is their growth. Yeah. So when you manage somebody from the time you start managing them to when you finish managing them, whether they get promoted or they leave the organization, you should leave them in a better place, even personally and professionally, hopefully trying to help them grow. So I really took that to heart. At J&J, when I joined, I was very lucky. There was a program called the Corporate Athletes Program, which, actually made me change things as well in my personal life. But they make you write a mission statement. And it's quite confronting, but mine was, reach my potential and help others reach their potential, whether it's on the professional life or my personal life. So I really fell in love really with people leadership.
Yeah. And I love the concept of continually evolving your leadership style. I think a lot of people, like we see when we do a job brief, for example, the comment would be like, they're an old school CFO or they haven't changed in 20 years. And then you see the other people that we do briefs where they're constantly working on themselves. And I think that shows great maturity. And I would love a leader like that on my team. I think that's a fantastic way to do it. And so do you think that changed also because your steps outside of finance? Do you think that opened the way you manage people differently because you worked in a few different times in the commercial side? Yeah.
I mean, certainly it made me, so the first time, like I said, was at Coca-Cola, working in that competitor strategy space. So there was a strategy team embedded within the commercial team of Coca-Cola. And then, when I moved into that kind of business intelligence, etc., what it makes you think differently is, I mean, certainly, I don't think I was, but, the traditional accountant that just does their numbers, makes their compliance right, look backwards, explain the numbers. It's certainly not what, people do in that commercial space or in that strategy space. So certainly taught me to look forward, to look outside of the organization, to get some insights. So obviously a lot of market share analysis at J&J. We did like patient-based models and a lot of patient data, like quite amazing, like longitudinal data, people seeing based on their kind of Medicare data, what kind of drugs or treatment did they do? And then, how did that evolve over time? How did that work for those patients? And then Coca-Cola, obviously a lot of market analysis, competitor analysis, which was also quite interesting.
Yeah, of course.
I set up at the time, it's gone now, but social networking, which I think now it's just a common thing. But at the time, there was a thing called Yammer. Set that up to try and get all the salespeople to connect to each other and with the marketing and insights team to share information and hear, what's happening with competitors and all that stuff. So to try and create a bit of a dynamic thing. So it just makes you think differently. And again, thinking you've got to get the insights from the market externally to try and drive your business, not just live within your bubble of your organization.
Yeah. And two things. Were you a career planner? Like, did you have in mind that you wanted to ultimately be CFO? And I guess we'll start with that one.
Yeah. That's a good question. I had a dream when I was, a young guy. Maybe not as a child. I don't know who wants to be a CFO when you're 5 years old, like your son. But when I started my career in finance, I thought, I would love to be a CFO one day.
Yeah.
But I was not really a career planner thinking I'm going to do this and then I'm going to do that, right? So I took opportunities at the time because that felt like it made sense. So like I said, when I moved from Thales, it's because I thought I'm going to get pigeonholed in defense, right? There was no reason to leave. It was all going well. Flight Center. So it was a very commercial role at Flight Center as well, which was great. So I really enjoyed that. And that's what I gravitate towards. When I left Flight Center, it's just that the head office being in Brisbane, I was kind of where I could go in New South Wales. And I thought, okay, I need the next move there. So Coca-Cola was a great brand. The role I took at Coca-Cola, the first one, was commercial manager for their IT department. So not the most sexy role or whatever, but so maybe a bit of planning. I thought, okay, that's, an entry door, whatever the expression is, put my foot in the door, get in there, and then hopefully try to prove my worth to go in a different place. when I did leave Coca-Cola after going into that strategy role, I thought, okay, I've done that. I was having a lot of fun. I did all sorts of things. But I thought, again, my son was young. I'm like, okay, I've got to provide for my family. I've got to keep growing my career and my income. I thought, will I really able to do the switch to marketing or sales? And it felt like places like Coca-Cola, and I think a lot of places, they want the salespeople or the marketing people to have carried the bag, that expression of being the salesperson, having done the hard yard. So I thought, I don't think I'm going to do that. So better come back to finance. So there, when the role came as financial controller, I thought, I've got good experience in FP&A, in business partnering, and now even more in that strategy, insight generation. But I'm not very strong technically. I didn't start as a chartered accountant, for example, like a lot of people do, which is, I think, a great grounding. So I thought, no, I'm going to do that. And it's going to be tough. And it certainly challenged myself. And J&J, one, they had the SOX standards to adhere to, which is much higher than what we have to do in Australia. And they're quite an amazing company. Their level of ethics, their level of compliance. I remember my CFO who hired me, Conrad Fisher, always said, this is the line. And obviously on the podcast, it's hard to show a line. You don't want to be anywhere near the line. So it's not about trying to push things and trying to get advantage. We operate above it. We never want to be close to the line. So that challenged me, right? I just took the opportunity because it made sense at the time with some thinking. But certainly when I was at J&J and I did graduate recruitment for Coca-Cola and J&J. So I hired a lot of people, and I always talk about this career lattice. It's not a ladder. It is a lattice, right? You've got to go different places. Don't wait. As long as you're learning things, be patient, learn things, you're going to get there, but there's many different paths to get to the outcome.
And that's exactly what I was going to ask you next about the financial controller role, because it was obvious when I was reading through your background in our first conversation, it was such a strong commercial foundation, and then to get to CFO, people believe that you need to round out the technical ability, which I agree. But I thought that's a good move, and also a hard move given the complexity of the compliance side of an American, J&J. It's not easy to navigate. So yeah, that's exactly what I was going to ask you. So that's good. And so what do you think your experiences across all the different industries, do you think that led you to make the move to the non-for-profit sector? I mean, you touched on it a little bit earlier about having that purpose. What was it specifically that drew you to St. Vincent and that?
Yeah, I think it is having worked in healthcare. Like I said, having experience where you can still work for a commercial organization, and all the organizations I work for are fantastic. But you work for a commercial organization with amazing brands, with, what it comes with to have a big multinational, but it also has that sense of purpose. Like you feel good about, what you're doing and the outcome for patients, a grandfather living a bit longer, seeing their grandchildren, be born and things. It's just, it's amazing, right? So I felt really privileged and I really love that. I also like at Johnson Johnson, they've got a credo, which I know a lot of people know it, but if you don't know it, I recommend you look into it, which was written in the 1940s, which makes it quite exceptional. And it says basically they have a responsibilities to the patients and the doctors and nurses. That's the first paragraph. And the second paragraph, responsibility for the employees. And the third paragraph is they're responsible for the market in which they operate, like if you want, the society around which they operate. And the last one is they're responsible for their shareholders. And it's written in that order on purpose, right? That if you basically look after, your clients, your employees, and what's around you, you're going to be running a good business and your shareholders are going to get a good return. And I thought that was also very refreshing rather than just, hey, let's focus on shareholder return. And when I want to move to non-for-profit, right, the decisions is certainly not, I wish it was a little bit more, but it's not about, how much return are we going to make, right? It is
Correct.
About the impact we're going to create. It is about the employee. It's about the community, etc. Like if we exit a First Nation program and there's nobody to take that First Nation program, who else is going to do it? What about the community, etc. So it's kind of at Vinny's, as I call it, they call it a discerning framework. So when you try to make a decision, at J&J was the same. They had to make some tough decision. They just look through all these different lenses to make a decision, not just what is going to be the impact on the P&L. So that certainly was something that I really enjoyed and I thought was a right way to manage a business.
Yeah. And I think the return on impact versus ROI is an interesting concept. And I think when we spoke, you gave me some pretty good examples of maybe some programs that when you quantify them, you realize that the impact is probably less than people thought. And then you have to have the difficult conversation of trying to redirect those funds. So how do you go about measuring, ROI versus the impact?
Yeah. Measuring impact is hard. And it's hard because it's not really defined. I mean, there's some university who are trying to help define kind of what's the formula or whatever, as ROI is very easy. It's an easy formula. So you've got to invest, a non-for-profit organization have to invest in capturing impact first and then be able to measure it. So a lot of investment often in the CRM where the people deliver the program to go, okay, maybe what was the quality of life? What was the level of isolation? What was, obviously the homelessness or other, factors that impacted maybe some addictions or whatever. So kind of measure that when somebody enters a program and then when people exit the program. How do they feel on those factors, which are all a little bit subjective, obviously. You have to then measure those, which, the people on the front line, all they want to do is help people. They don't want to measure things. So it's also hard to get adoption. But once you start getting those data, you can see that one program is actually measuring a lot of impact. Like the people have got this and it's a longer term impact than other programs where, yes, it feels nice and the person and it's touching and all these different things, but is it really changing that person's life? Are they really going to be able to go from more of a very vulnerable life to a more what you call normal, kind of life with some fundamental things that are firm in their life, that will sustain them. So you've got to invest, you've got to measure it. And then when you make choices, then it's easier, right? So, okay, well, should we invest more in this program or less in this program, or should we continue this program or whatever? If you have that behind, you take away some of the emotion out of it and you can make a more informed decision.
And how do you go about driving that type of change or adoption of that program? Because like you mentioned, and this is very well known, the people at the front line, all they care about is the people. That they're there because they genuinely want to see considerable change, sustainable change. And so I would see it to be quite confronting when you go to tell someone who's so passionate about that, hey, look, we're moving the money on to a different thing. How do you go about adopting that process?
It's very emotional. And both, Vinnie's and the Red Cross are member-based organizations. So there are members who've been there, their grandparents might have been there, maybe their parents, so there's a lot of programs that have been there for a long time and it's very close to their heart. So it is hard. It is hard for people also, to your point, that just wants to do good, for even to introduce financial for sustainability. Yeah. Because they're like, well, like we've helped all these people, but we can't help more, because we're not being funded to do that by the government, or we don't have enough, kind of donations coming through to do that. And people don't understand. They say, but there's people who need help. We need to help them.
Yeah.
So just this introducing financial sustainability to programs is hard already. And as well, obviously, but the impact is probably a better discussion than financial sustainability, because at least they go, okay, I understand. We're going to do this because that's got more impact than this. So they feel better about that. But you've got to take them on the journey. You've got obviously to get the leaders on board to understand, explain to them that, if we're not financial sustainable, and I talked at Vinnie's and at Red Cross, I had to do very large turnarounds. Both organizations were using millions and millions of dollars of losses. And at some point you can't sustain and you close the door. And imagine if there was not a Red Cross anymore or not a Vinnie's anymore. I mean, these are amazing organizations that help so many people. So you explain that, if it's not financially sustainable, we won't be able to do that in the future. And all this great help will stop. So that's the first part. And then you just introduce some frameworks, a bit of a discerning framework, a bit of obviously a business case framework, so that we go, okay, well, let's understand, if we do this program, is it financially sustainable? Is it doing the impact? Is there another reason why we're doing it? Could somebody else do it and maybe do it better than us? So you try to introduce this conversation to try and, again, take the emotions of it.
Yeah, and that's an interesting concept, that maybe you defer the specialism to a different organization who can do that. And I've never thought of that, actually. And so I would imagine it takes a good amount of trust for you to start making these changes when you're going through a massive turnaround, like you mentioned, losing millions of dollars. How do you build trust and collaboration during that type of change?
Yeah, coming into both organizations, and the other interesting change from going from multinationals to working for non-for-profit, but it could have been another organization, is I never worked for a board, because you always report to the next level up, whether it's Singapore or France or wherever else.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Or the US. So this one is worked with a board. And so the first thing for me, building trust, is transparency. So I changed the reporting. I very transparent with the results, whether they were good or whether they were bad. very transparent with the budgeting process and what, where I thought the risks were and etc. So just gain the trust by being transparent. And if we said we're going to do something, deliver it. So that's why, when the going got tough and we were trying to do turnaround and people said, oh, I'm not sure if we're going to reach the target, even people in my team, I'm like, no, we need to reach the target, because then it builds trust. They say you're going to do something and you're doing it, right? So I think that's an important one. But the leadership team as well. I remember at Vinny's, before I was hired, they went through 2 or 3 CFOs and they never managed to really work with the leadership team and the board, etc. So you've got to earn the trust of the execs as well, because again, a lot of them are humanitarians that are now humanitarians leaders. So again, they've got different points of view. So one, you should, on top of the trust, you got to add value at the end of the day, like every role, right? If you don't add value, people go, why are you, giving me grief with investment and things? So add value. And I think you have to do a little bit of tough love around some of those commercial concepts that you've learned working for those great organizations I did, and apply them to this. Like I said, whether it is a robust budgeting process, some strong reporting, a good business case process, just to make sure there's rigor behind that. I remember at the start, it was like people were trying to push through decisions without having done that rigor. And I had to be a little bit strong to go, no, we can't. We cannot do that. Imagine if we accept this funding and we're going to lose money doing it. Now we're going backwards, right? But that's the beauty. And that's why I get a lot of satisfaction working for non-for-profit and having come and worked in those blue chip companies who are amazing companies, right?
Of course.
The foundations you learn from them is amazing. So be able to apply what good looks like from those organizations to a place that really needs it, because they are doing so much good for people. I get a lot of, joy out of it.
And what was that like, the interaction with the board? That's such an interesting point. It's funny, I never thought of it that way. You're dealing with, like you said, a reporting line, whether it be in Asia, US, UK, France, wherever it is. And then you're at the center of the attention. You're right there sitting in front of the board. What is that like?
Yeah, it's a different, it's good in a way that, there's less red tape. Right?
Yeah.
You're there at the end, but you also feel that sense of responsibility even more. Like at Johnson & Johnson, there was cash, and there were people managing cash globally and, doing this and acquisition and whatever, but you never really felt that tension. Yes, you felt the tension of hitting your numbers. If you didn't hit your numbers, you'll be in trouble. But all this cash balance sheet things was less there. As when you work for this non-for-profit, which was losing a lot of millions of dollars, depleting the balance sheet, like if you stuff it up, if you don't manage to do the turnaround in the time and you stop burning the cash, you could be part of being responsible of, putting out of a business this amazing organization.
Yeah, of course.
I think Red Cross have been there for now 111 years in Australia, just before the First World War. So you feel very accountable to that, but you've got all the, everything you need to basically make a difference, because this is you, the CEO, the leadership team, you're there with the board making the decision on strategy and all these different things. So it is quite liberating on one side as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So I guess to get into a little bit more of the detail on the actual turnaround, how did you go about that process?
Yeah, it's not easy, obviously, but you've got to be disciplined. You've got to look, starting with the strategy first, and then going, okay, what programs are we doing that are not on strategy? Are we over time because, something was attractive or something was emotional or maybe opportunistic? We started doing all these different programs that are some strategy kind of scope creep. So you've got to look at the programs and go, okay, which programs are core to what we do? Which one are not financially sustainable? So make some hard calls on the program, which is tough because, again, we're helping people in all these programs and it's very emotional from the people involved. But obviously, then you've got to look at the rest of the cost base and you've got to make sure that anything that is not front end and anything that is more enabling functions to be as efficient as possible and as small as possible. So make some choices there. But you've got to think, which part of that gives you and we don't use competitive advantage in a non-for-profit world. We should, but we don't. But which part actually gives you an IP that you need to be efficient? So you want to protect those and maybe capabilities that you need to build, maybe around risk or some other things, or maybe data, digital. But yeah, so you need to make choices there. And then obviously the last one, which should be first, but when you do turnarounds, it's often last, it's the revenue. So what bets can we make? Where can we grow our revenue? Because it's a lot easier to get out of, deficit by growing revenue than cutting costs. So you've got to be, it's tough and you've got to be ruthless. But yeah, that's what we did the 2 times, and we made sure we engage obviously the leadership across the organization. We made sure we were transparent with, like, for example, in my team, I had to make a lot of reduction across my different teams, and I tried to say as much as I could. I often say too much than what I'm meant to say. That's how I build trust with people. So just be transparent and say, guys, we're doing this for that reason, but we need to, and the outcome would be better. I had an experience at J&J where they did a global program to really basically wipe out a lot of costs out of all the support functions, with some centralization in Manila and Singapore, etc. For example, that role I had as a financial controller at J&J had 25 people. And when I left that role, that team ultimately became 4 people.
Wow.
Right? So a lot of roles. But throughout, we still managed to keep really high engagement scores, because, again, I was trying to explain to people that a lot of the roles that were going to be moved and the role of the work that's going to be moved are really quite, repetitive kind of roles, whether it's in APAR or some of the accounting functions. So then the roles and the job that will stay, in the team is going to be more exciting, more meaty type of work. So, and then some people decided to opt out. We had to make some people redundant, but we ended up, with, people throughout the journey understand why we're doing this, and obviously why we need to remove costs from the organization.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And so, have you had a moment in your career where you think, like, this is the reason why I do this?
I mean, I get a lot of joy. Like, I'm getting a lot of joy working in those purpose organization, but I got a lot of joy working in the other organization as well. I think the part that I enjoy the most is that people leadership.
Yeah.
Like I said, turning around this organization is quite a proud moment. But I think probably my proudest moment is when I turned around somebody that worked for me. I remember when I joined at J&J, there was somebody in my team, and, the CFO was saying, I don't think he's going to make it. I don't think he's strong enough and technically, etc. And I talked to the person and worked with them and shared the feedback very openly. I just said, that's what people are saying. What do you think? And what are we going to do to turn that around? And when you manage to turn somebody around, and they've got something amazing at J&J called the key question. What is your key question, on the person? So, people have goals and development areas and all that stuff. But this one was when you did your succession planning or, kind of managing performers, etc. There was, what is their key question? And their key question is, what do they need to answer to basically show that they have the potential to move to where they want to go next? So that really narrows it down, right? So for that person, it was, do you have the technical knowledge to be able to do that? He was amazing at other things, but you have the technical knowledge. And so, okay, that's your key question. How are we going to answer? And the person really worked hard, and we worked together, and we made sure that they had the right exposure, demonstrating some of the technical things they did, they put extra work, and then they turned right around, and now they are director in the organization. They've done really well. So things like that, where you can turn people around and help people grow, see some of those graduates that are now, all very successful people.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable. Yeah, that's
what a poignant question to ask. It just eliminates all the gray. It's
That's
just
right.
black and white. I love that. That's great. And
it forces the leader to think about it, right?
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
just one key question. What is it about them that you're going, I'm not sure. I like, they're good, but are they good enough for, whatever?
Yeah.
But so it's fantastic.
And did you lean on mentors throughout your career in terms of, like, are there people that you still talk to if you're having any questions?
Yeah, I was lucky to have some great bosses. Like I said, I mentioned Alan Ball, who was my first boss at Thales. Moving to Flight Center, there was a person called David Panman, who was an amazing people leader, so passionate. And then the person who hired me at J&J, Conrad Fisher, it felt like, my parents were overseas, and they almost felt like they were second fathers, in a way, looking after me, being here, giving me advice about, what house to buy and how much debt I should get. I think it was a ploy to make me to work harder, but so I'm very lucky that I had some amazing people, and I was able to, talk to them. Also some friends outside of work, doing similar careers. So when I had to make some tough decisions, like, for example, one of the tough decisions I had to make when I left Flight Center, basically I told them that there was a reshuffle. They did a restructure, did 2 restructures in 2 years. And there was a new person that was put as my manager. It was a different structure. And I don't think they were strong. And people around didn't think they were strong. So I said to them, I'm not enjoying this. I don't think the person is strong. Plus, I don't see then a path to where I need to go next or whatever. So I talked to people for a while. I talked to the national CFO. Nothing happened. And I said, I'm going to look out. I was transparent. I'm going to look outside. So I did. And then I found the role at Coca-Cola. And I think it was I was finishing on a Friday, starting on a Monday. On the Thursday, the CFO from, national CFO comes down and says, okay, we've heard the same thing as what you're saying from the national commercial leaders and all these different things. We want you to stay and we want you to get that person's role. And it was a big role. I was looking after 60 people,
wow.
And I was only looking after a small team. He was not a commercial manager for IT, which is not super exciting. He was, looking after the whole of New South Wales. And that was a tough decision. And so I did talk to different people like that to try and say what should you do. But at the end of the day, I thought, you know what? I made a commitment to Coca-Cola to go. I let these people, I gave them a chance, and now it's a bit late. It's too little, too late in a way. I appreciated the sentiment and I really enjoyed Flight Centre. But yeah, so I made the call to, no, I'm going to stick with my commitment and see where my journey takes me.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so just as a broader comment, what do you think are the biggest misconceptions about running a for-purpose or non-for-profit business?
Well, the biggest misconception people, and I don't know what it's done to my CV, or I probably have a bit of an idea, but a lot of people think like people go to non-for-profit to retire, right? And I've just turned 50, so I'm unfortunately not close to retiring. But I think a lot of people think, yeah, it's retirement, it's easy life, it's easy and all these different things. It's not easy. It's hard. So why? I mean, Coca-Cola, amazing organization. But if you bring it down, what they're doing is they're bottling products, and they're putting it on trucks and they're selling it to people.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a lot more complexity.
Yeah,
and,
of course.
Pricing and category and all these different things, and grocery versus whatever, supply chain, etc. But it is one thing. You're doing one thing. When you work in non-for-profit, so if I talk Red Cross very quickly, we have a retail network. We've got 167 retail stores. Okay, so now you've got to be a retail expert. And then we run first aid and mental health courses. Okay, so now you've got to be an RTO expert. Okay, so now we run block-funded government contracts. Okay, we're doing fundraising. Okay, let's be a fundraising expert. Or we're doing fee-for-service program as well. A bit, it's not like NDIS or HK, but similar where you get paid for claims. Okay, so now I've got to be a fee-for-service. So this is so complex.
Yeah,
right? So many, so very diverse, so many different things that you've got to put your hand around. You've got to have your team to have to put their hand around. And the other complexity is the margins are tiny. Again, having worked for Coca-Cola, Johnson Johnson, very, very pleasant margins. But you work for a non-for-profit, the government, 10%, 15% is kind of the maximum they allow for you to keep, to basically use to pay for all your overheads and all these different things, which is way too low. A donor, right? If I say, please give $100 to the Red Cross, you probably expect $80 to $90 to go to the programs that we do or to person in need. So again, you're operating between 10 and 20% margin, which is very, very low. So you have to get across all these different breadths, of programs and do the best that you can, but not a lot of money to even invest in, for example, systems to be able to measure accurately things or do your reporting properly or whatever else. So very little margins and quite the breadth. So it is challenging.
Yeah, it is
very challenging.
Yeah. And so just to kind of wrap things up, Karitani, can you tell everyone what they do? And then how did you get involved at the board level?
Yeah, so I'm really delighted to be on the board of Karitani. I'm the treasurer or the lead for the chair of the finance committee. And I joined 2 years ago. So I was lucky to be able to do the AICD course. That's something I thought, okay, I think I could give back working on some boards, etc., and start a bit of a board career. And then a great friend that I worked with at St Vincent de Paul was on the board of Karitani. She's a lawyer. And then she said, hey, we're looking for a new finance person to be on the board. Would you like to join? So that's how I joined. And often that's how the case is, through contacts. So it's an amazing organization that helps parents and children the first 2,000 days. Breastfeeding is not working, or feeding, or postnatal depression, or whatever else. So really, beautiful health. So so we see a health and non-for-profit organization, $20 million. But yeah, wonderful board, very collegiate. We had to deal with a couple of hairy moments to deal with as well. So great learning from me as well as a board. But yes, I'm really enjoying. That's my first board, and I've really enjoyed the last 2 years working on it. I feel very privileged.
Yeah, and I think it's a different. You're not an employee of Karatani, so you're guiding as opposed to delivering. How did you find balancing that?
Yeah, it's different. I mean, one thing that slight tangent is that when I work, working collaboratively is very important to me. Like I've walked in the past into a leadership team, and the leadership team were not aligned, and they were people jockeying for position, and like there were tiers of, these two people were higher level, kind of that, the way it was managed. I personally, it makes me physically ill to work like that. I try to then bring people together and create everybody around the table, equalitarian, etc. So I believe in that collaboration and working in a leadership team and go broader than your function, and that's an advice that, David Gonski spoke at a conference I was in, and he was saying, make sure as a CFO, you go as broad as possible. Do not stick in your lane. At the board meeting, comment about different things and be broad. So I'm used to that, and that's how I like working, right? Everybody contributes. Doesn't matter what function you are, we're all there. So on a board, that's what you have to do, because a board, there's no individual in a board. The board makes the decision, right? So it has to be collegiate, it has to be respectful, but you have to add value and add some insight. So I really enjoyed that transition. Yes, and they teach you in the AICD, you have to learn that, as a board member, you're not an executive. So don't try and do their job, right?
Correct.
And even in my role, where I'm an executive dealing with boards, sometimes I'm feeling like, okay, are some people maybe coming down a little bit too much? So you've got to learn to work at a different level. It's not about hierarchy, but it's just a different level of decision making. You've got to learn when to come in, though, because if there's something wrong, the board is responsible. You can't say, well, I did not know, right? And
Correct.
There's been a lot of press about issues with governance and boards. So yeah, very different. I'm new to it. I'm learning it, but yeah, it's a different dynamic.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you very much, JB. That's been a fantastic episode. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for coming.
You're welcome. Yeah, I really enjoyed it as well. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you enjoy the insights from our network of inspiring finance leaders as they share their journey from Go to CFO. If you're looking to make the next move in your finance career or build your team, get in contact with the team at AXR Recruitment and Search today. We are passionate about building careers, not jobs, teams, not just hires. If you enjoyed the episode, hit the like button and subscribe today. See you next time.